Welcome back to GBN America. I mean, this was the pardon heard all around the world, wasn't it? President Joe Biden said he wouldn't do it. His spokespeople said he wouldn't do it. They kept saying this day would never come. Lo and behold, there was an epiphany over a Thanksgiving dinner that saw Hunter Biden officially pardoned. Now, here to talk me through it all is Katie Cherkashy, who's a criminal defence attorney, former federal prosecutor as well. Thank you very, very much. Tremendous to have you on the show. Right then, so what is really going on here? Has Hunter Biden got away with, well, not murder, but frankly everything else?
Well, he could have gotten away with murder because the pardon that he received essentially wiped out any culpability for any crimes over an 11-year period. And now Hunter had already been convicted of several different offenses. And so those convictions will go away and he will not be sentenced for those as he was scheduled to be. But he's also immune from being prosecuted for criminal acts that may have occurred during the time frame, but that were never even charged yet.
Indeed. And let's just, ground ourselves really in some of the things that Hunter Biden did, some of the stuff that was on the laptop. What are we talking about here?
Well, Hunter had already received a conviction for essentially lying on a federal gun form. And then he was also convicted through a guilty plea of essentially tax evasion and failing to pay taxes that were ultimately paid back. So he was going to be sentenced for both of those different cases in December, but now with this pardon coming down, that will not be happening. And in addition to the actual cases that already occurred, there was investigations and ongoing inquiries about his financial dealings that some people thought may form the basis for future charges. But again, with the pardon at this point reaching all the way back to 2014, he likely cannot face charges for anything that happened in that time frame. Although there is a little bit of a question about how broad this pardon is and whether it really would apply to all of that. But for all intents and purposes, the president does have pretty limitless pardon power.
He does, but has he not also pardoned himself here from any potential inquiry that might happen once he's out of office? So his potential involvement in alleged dodgy dealings in Ukraine, a little bit of money on top for the big guy, that kind of stuff.
Well, Joe Biden has not actually pardoned himself. There is also a question about whether a president can issue a pardon to themselves. It's never been done before. Some people have said that they may be able to do so. Incidentally, the Supreme Court had recently come down with a decision about the fact that presidents are largely immune from criminal prosecution for acts that occurred while they were in office. And so that may end up benefiting President Biden, even though he spoke out against that. But in terms of his own culpability for acts that occurred while he was not in office, he does not have any sort of immunity or a pardon by extension based on what he gave to his son. But it does limit the use of a lot of that information, I guess, if they were to pursue something with the financial dealings.
Isn't this just the complete and utter mockery of justice, the total mockery of Joe Biden's reputation, with it really damaging the Democrats, damaging potentially the rule of law? I mean, the excuse that Joe Biden was making here, that is almost, if you read that statement, you would almost think that Hunter Biden was like Nelson Mandela. He'd been prosecuted against his will, he'd been kept in shackles for years in some kind of hellhole, and this guy was entirely innocent. I mean, that might have a bit more weight had we not all seen the stuff he'd done. We've all seen the stuff that was on the laptop. We've all seen all of that. And Joe Biden now has basically admitted through his actions, not his words, that his son is a wrong 'un and he's let him off anyway, despite all of the stuff that they were trying to do for President Trump.
Well, exactly. I mean, Hunter Biden is the least sympathetic defendant probably of all time. And so the idea that this is some sort of warranted gift to him, I don't think anybody is buying that. At the same time, of course, the president does have this authority to issue a pardon, whether other people think it's warranted or not. The biggest problem, of course, is the fact that he kept vehemently denying that he would do this, even when he was directly asked every which way and whether he would commute the sentence, maybe even allowing the convictions to stand. And he denied all of that, all while allowing these trials to proceed at great expense to American taxpayers. And he could have very well called off these trials at any time. And I think that's really really the biggest rub here in terms of the lies and the denials that have been issued throughout this process.
Do you wonder whether or not one of the reasons why Joe Biden looked so happy when he was next to Trump is because he thought he could actually pardon his own son now? Because if he'd have won, if he'd have stayed on and he'd have won, I don't think he'd have been able to, as a sitting president, to be able to do this. And I wonder if maybe that's one of the reasons why he was all smiles.
Well, presidents do have the pardon power, and traditionally they'll exercise it when they're leaving office. In this case, the timing of Hunter's trials seemed to coincide with the idea that he would probably be getting a pardon, especially his second trial, which was for the tax evasion, which Hunter was scheduled to actually fully litigate and fight up until the very last minute when he decided to plead guilty without any sort of protection or any sort of plea deal in place. And so that's when I think it became quite suspicious to most of us in the legal world that he must have known, or at least really thought it was highly likely he was going to be getting this pardon, because he did face significant jail time, especially being a second-time offender since he had that prior conviction. So his sentencing for that case.
So but Joe Biden passed a law that sent people to prison for a very long time for the exact same stuff that his son's done, and then he pardoned his own son. And I think this cuts right to the core of what many people regard as a flagrant hypocrisy in certain quarters of the Democrats or people on the left or the Liberals. And this carries through across a variety of different subjects. I mean, I've just done a segment prior to this that would urge people to go and watch on GBN America, on YouTube, etc., about illegal immigration. We have problems in this country where people say that we should throw the borders open, but they don't want to take a refugee into their own homes. They won't possibly ever do that. And I wonder if you've got a situation here now in America where the credibility, the moral fibre, the perseverance towards law and order and all of that stuff that the Democrats like to push is just dead in the water.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the hypocrisy is at a very high level, especially when the Democrats were campaigning on the idea that Donald Trump would supposedly weaponize the Justice Department and go after his political opponents, when they were doing that all along for many years. And the Hunter Biden prosecutions were not specifically politically motivated in any way. Now, of course, he did have more attention on him because of his status, but I mean, that's just part of the idea of being subject to the laws of this country, and prosecutors have discretion generally in what cases they take forward. But certainly, again, there was not a lot of sympathy there. Even with his claims of being an addict, there are, probably the vast majority of people in the prisons have addiction issues and have very sympathetic stories. And certainly they're still held accountable for that, as they should be.
Is there any way that the Trump regime might still go after Hunter or Joe, do you think? Or do you think they could go the other way? Do you think they might use this as a way of pardoning people who've been involved in the January 6th incident?
Well, there are still questions about whether Hunter could be held responsible for things after the end of the pardon. The pardon expired as of December 1st. So anything after that point, he's not immune from prosecution. There's been discussions about whether he might be brought before Congress to be questioned about some of his Ukrainian dealings and whether he could even invoke his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent because he couldn't be prosecuted. And there's a lot of different pathways that might lead to other allegations of criminal misconduct against him. In terms of Donald Trump and the potential pardons for people involved with the January 6th incident, he has made it clear that he would strongly consider issuing pardons in many of those cases. And that, again, is within his full discretion. And a lot of people have known that and do support that in many of those cases as well.
Yeah, indeed. And just to round this off, really, in terms of where this leaves Trump now, this idea of orange man bad, he's a rule breaker, he's a criminal. When you hold these two cases up side by side and Joe Biden goes off trying to say that this has basically almost been a political persecution and prosecution of his own son, again, I will emphasise for crimes that we can all literally see, versus Trump, who has managed to weather, an onslaught really of this kind of stuff. I mean, actually, Joe Biden pardoning his son Hunter is a good thing for Trump, isn't it, in the round, do you think?
Oh, I think it's a very good thing for Trump. And again, I mean, you can't even compare the Hunter Biden cases, which are pure criminal cases, very straightforward. He was dead to rights. things that we've all heard about being criminal, compared to the Donald Trump cases where we call them lawfare because they were these very creative, never before used interpretations of criminal law that most people can't even explain what he did. And the reason is because most of those cases are politically based and would all likely be overturned on appeal, even the ones that are still kind of pending, or the one that he got a conviction in. There's significant legal issues with that. And so it's really comparing apples to oranges in terms of saying that Trump is a convicted felon, which technically he's not at this point anyway, and Hunter Biden, who is indisputably criminal.
Yeah, and look, hey, I don't want to be seen to be digging anyone out for things that go on in their own families, all right? And I think that would be unfair. That said, I think there is a case to say about the mindset of certain individuals where if Joe Biden was willing to tolerate his son's behaviour, cover for his son's behaviour, and now, pardon his own son, I wonder if that does sometimes cut to the core of an individual. He obviously very much emphasises, any father would kind of do this. And maybe he's right. Maybe any father would suck it up and try to do whatever it takes to keep their son out of prison. But Katie, we're gonna leave it there for today. But thank you very much, and I do really hope to talk to you again about all of this, because we've got a fascinating time coming up, haven't we? And I, for one, am very, very much looking forward to what America has to offer in the coming months and years. So that's Katie Cherkashy there, who is a criminal defence attorney, former federal prosecutor. You take care. God bless. See you soon.
Thank you.